Some of you may not know the background behind my situation with Liana Kerzner, and that is fine. It will be explained in due time. Suffice to say that I maintain that Kerzner has not fully, accurately described the situation and events, and that all points will be eventually given their full context. However, this is not the video in which that will happen. This video deals with a very specific topic, which is the unethical behavior of Liana Kerzner, whom I will address now. Liana, I have seen you reveal intimate details that were shared with you in the most vulnerable friendship and trust. And after the dissolution of a friendship that happened at your hands, and I can prove that it did, I've seen you toss these details at the paws of your paying parasocial community to make my husband the object of scorn and stigma, betraying details of his mental health with relish. You said that you terminated our friendship because I accused you of deliberate cruelty, yet I believe that cruelty is the only word that fits your deeds, no matter how you wish to deny it. And if you wish me to prove that assertion, rest assured, that's what this is for. It isn't only about Asher or me, but also your former friends, your ex-clients. But for the time being, I am going to keep the focus narrow. There's a lot. And yes, you heard me right when I said I have seen it. It was not that stupid Kiwi Farmer screenshot that moved me to act. That was merely the point at which your behavior breached containment into the public. And it came not through my hand, but through your mouth. And your claims about us sabotaging you and breaking our contract, that's not true. But I'll take care of detailing that in full in a video that is to come. I do not wish to bloat the length of this one. But I already knew. I had already known by that point. For almost 10 months, I want to say. I need to check my dates, but I think it's 10 months. For 10 months, there have been people in your community who don't like what you're doing and what you did, and who want you to cut it out, and who have shared things with me. Not tiny little screen caps, just great swaths of detail. I'm talking about 280 plus full screenshots. I have seen and known more about what you have said to the intimate circle of your closest 100 or so paying friends than you can imagine. I have seen you betray trusted intimate details with relish that is disturbing, especially since despite all of our disagreements, all I have spoken about are the things you have said and done in public, and which have been said to me in public. In fact, I do believe I have a very strong case, considering the timeline. And this, despite your attempts at making me look like Stalker Chan. Emily Schooley, that is who you mean. By implying that I have written a hate blog full of false claims back in January or April. I believe it was the April one. You even made the claim that I wrote about you raging during the recording of the Bubblehead podcast. You claimed that it was written in the entry that I wrote in January 15, 2025. And I will show that. That claim is disproven because the blog post was preserved by the Internet Archive the day after it was published. And that anecdote doesn't exist in the blog. You can read the backed up version here at the archive yourself. So as you can see, this claim was made up.
It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. It never happened.
There are no other blogs where I've written about this. What I find funny is that your community never asked you for proof. They just took your word for it. They never even read the blog. Even Jake, whom you brought up as a material witness to claim that I was lying because he was present at the recording of the episode, didn't even read it. you kind of do discourage people from reading what the stalkers say and only accept the knowledge of it through your own accounting. That's something you share with Poppy, the siloing of information. Perhaps now my vehemence at certain points in the timeline will start making sense when you realize that I knew what you were doing. Things that people who weren't part of your 100 people Patreon-backed Discord couldn't see. So they have to take your word for everything. And then they don't know what you've done, so you can easily paint our actions as disproportionate. It's convenient when things aren't clear, isn't it? But with all of the claims of what Asher did and what I did, you know what I haven't done? I haven't spoken in the public square about the intimate details of your marriage, your relationship with Stephen, his mental health, your financial situation, or how those might have contributed to your side of the delays, all topics about which you saw fit to unilaterally disclose, and in many cases exaggerate and misrepresent, to your server of 100 people like piranhas at a feeding frenzy. And then, months later, when Asher publishes the conversations you have misrepresented for 9 months, the conversations that fully displayed how cruel you were, you make public protest that people are publishing your private communications and performing invasions of privacy. This after you published your conversation with the owner of the event company on TikTok because you had to defend yourself, so of course, when you did it, it was okay. You have to constantly tell people who you are so that they don't look too closely at what it is that you do. You've made a big deal because I said I had observed deliberate cruelty, which you took as a betrayal. But you know, I had never seen you do what you did. Savage someone like that in private. So anytime someone mentioned it to me, like the community manager's sibling from PAX, I disregarded it with the same narrative you conveniently give everyone. They're stalkers. They're obsessed with her. They're unwell. They're unhinged. They just want attention. I'm embarrassed to say that I believed you, but you are very good at getting people to believe that you are trustworthy. Well, when I saw you act towards Asher with that full, ruthless cruelty that you assure everyone is not part of your nature, it caused me to review all past interactions you had portrayed. Interactions where I had taken your word at face value. And I realized, this is probably what you did at PAX. This is probably what you did with Jess. This is probably what you did with Moises. This is probably what you did with Song. This is what you did with Asher. This is probably what you did with Gabe.
We'll be here all afternoon. Can you just open the door?
With almost every single person you have claimed blew up at you. Up until that point, every time you told Asher and I that someone was screaming at you, we literally thought someone was yelling at you on voice or typing in all caps like some granny angry at the internet in 1998. But you claimed Asher and I yelled and exploded at you in our conversation, and the published logs show that that is not true. You claimed you couldn't get a word in edgewise, and yet you had time to say blah 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 to Asher when he honestly put forth the beginning of his treatment plan to improve his mental health. You know, the thing you said he refused to comply on the cancellation video, a lie? And you certainly could get many words in edgewise to drag up the corpse of his father, who died by suicide, to strike hurtful blows at him. And you had time to write a reply that was twice as long as anything Asher ever wrote to you. The word counter doesn't lie. And yet, how did you portray Asher's style of communication? Oh, right.
He speaks in... And by the time you get to the end, you have no idea what the hell the guy's saying. And then he does it again.
Now let's take a look at some of yours. I sense a double standard here. And you know, because I could finally see things for what they might be, I started seeing many other interesting things that I didn't see before because you were too close, controlling the narrative like you always do. And you control the narrative about what truly happened at PAX when you sent Asher and I to the booth to help the Coles sit up, and you were left alone with the person who claimed you had verbally abused them. Yeah, I think there's a reason you dismissed that whole thing as something so dysfunctional you won't even go into it in your server, even though you do go into everything in your server. So, why avoid that? I also noticed interesting things like how your opinions of a certain writer changes depending on who you're talking to. And I remember how every time you seemed to be into something I was into, you'd appear enthusiastic, but you'd always let me do the bulk of the talking. And when I asked you, you were very reticent to give many details. Like, I still don't know today what your favorite song by Monique Cerf is, even though you assured me that you loved her. And then, of course, it was that time when you said you thought the idea of the Ultima Dragons was cool. But then you told your server that you only said that because you wanted me to feel important. Kind of like how Poppy recently said that the only reason she kept Sage around was because she felt sorry for her. About someone who incidentally has borderline and multiple issues concerning unaliving. But let's go back to you, although at this point the two of you are starting to look like a Venn diagram. So, you were being dishonest back then? You didn't need to appease me. This was long before Sparkle Muffin was even a thing, and I have the timeline to prove it. And you let out one fact. The fact that I was talking to you at the time trying to console you because you were despondent, feeling you were rejected by the Sierra community and everyone you met at PAX. You were feeling hurt because Al Lowe allegedly ran away from you and didn't stay for the performance, and you felt summarily rejected by the community and devs because of the conflagration that you claimed had been initiated by the community manager and resulted in a public scene. Because you were heartbroken from the whole PAX experience, I said you should come with me to the 30th anniversary celebration of the Dragons and have a chance to meet Lord British, Richard, and actually spend time with him and talk to him, as Asher and I did, outside of an interview in which you sputtered like a fangirl and admitted that was the worst interview you ever did. Incidentally, you kind of didn't look great when you made fun of me on your server by saying, Lord British isn't a real person. Lord British is the moniker of Richard Garriott goes by, and the one he signs his games under. We Ultima Dragons call him LB when referring to him or just talking to him. Close friends get to call him Richard. I'm not a close friend of his. I'd love to be, but I've never sought to impose myself on him because the dude is busy. He did see many of the screens of the game since I told him I was inspired by Ultima 6 for the UI, and he liked it. I remember showing you and his replies, and you said that was cool. But I guess you probably didn't mean that either. You want to know the sad thing? I only showed the very, very cropped parts of the PAX conversation in that is relevant because you said some very incredibly vulnerable things in it. And that is way more consideration than you've shown Asher insofar as his privacy. I don't want you yelping about invasion of privacy because I'm going to present incontrovertible evidence that you've violated that since at least January. And we knew. And we waited for you to redeem yourself. But we are the ones who have an unacceptable lack of impulse control. So, here's the question. Were you lying when you said that to your server? That you only said that to make me feel important? Like you could. But were you trying to paint me as some sort of pathetic person, desperate to have some relevance? It appears that what you say you truly believe at one point or another seems to get rewritten entirely upon future events, and the past gets reauthored so that whomever you seem to have thought was great and talented suddenly isn't talented, isn't good, is a terrible person, and only has one friend from college and one local friend. I mean, you know that's a lie, because you're very aware that I regularly see Kristen, Aaron, and Daniel for dinner, movies, board games, almost every other week. Not right now because they're selling a house. There's no place to meet. But I've sent you pictures of them and the bulldog and the baby. But you also know that I see Mike, Richard, and Suzanne pretty frequently. I was even asked to sing at a bar mitzvah for Mike's student, and you know that because I showed you the version of the Lechadodi they asked me to sing, and I asked you to check my Hebrew because, I'm not Jewish. So I can confidently show that, yet again, you're lying. Deliberately, this time, and intentionally misrepresenting me. But why the lie? Well, because it places me, the recipient, in a double bind. If I don't clarify, we come across as loners whom nobody cares about and who are incapable of forming healthy relationships in their small apartment, which is kind of a mental health social stigma trap there. But if we clarify, then we come across as desperate, saying, no, I have friends, which again is another social mental stigma trap. And the ultimate aim? No matter which track the person takes, you can always manipulate the angle to make them look utterly bad one way or another, so that you can portray them to other people as pathetic. You should be proud. That is a very much mean girl move. It's amazing that nobody in your server even realizes that's what it was. Or maybe they do. And they're just okay with being mean girls to the people they don't like Bobby Calloway. When Bianca made that, what I perceived to be a snide comment about me and my job, asking me if I had regained my church job, and I pointed out that I had a full-time employment, not just a church gig, you did this. Well, there's a lot going on in one screenshot here. Eileen, of course, is faithfully performing her role as your mean girl henchman in waiting. She's already learned a lot from you, including making up motivations and psychological states for people, so good for her. But it's not that you've been lying about us for several months, no. It's that our world has fallen apart because you rejected us. Jesus. Actually, no. We're just calling you out on your lies because you have a wide reach, and we take the damage to our reputation seriously. And I have already established in my previous video, if you actually watched it, instead of summarizing it via AI or something, that regardless of your actions and your accusations, people can and have identified me and Asher after the video went live, even before we spoke up. But the interesting thing here is watching Liana Kerzner, peer counselor, mental health stigma, warrior, and disability advocate. Well, this is an example of a behavior that is very common in this server. The practice of personal disclosures to tear down someone who upsets Liana regardless of the veracity of the claims or whether she had the right of disclosure. It is kind of ghoulish, and it is cruel. And what is most disconcerting of all is that the community she supposedly fosters around kindness and combating mental health stigma willingly and gleefully participates. Like here, Bobby Calloway, author, former indie wrestler, and actor, agreed 100% with Liana when she mocked my husband for not being able to work for 10 years and for having been too incapacitated to fill out necessary Medicaid paperwork so that he was kicked off Medicaid. Yeah, his disability can get that bad. But Bobby Calloway, a dear friend of Liana's and part of her community who speaks up about the challenges of living with autism, which he calls an invisible disability because most people don't consider it a disability if they can't see it, and thus judge him unfairly for it, did that. And it's pretty frequent behavior. Between Liana, Eileen, and Bobby, it's a finely tuned trio of mean girls. I guess I've got to comment on how absurdly ridiculous the Blue Sky post today was, okay? It kind of ties in. I'll get to the meat of it at some other point, but he lives in a very small apartment. Who are you?
Thing I can't stand, it's snobbery and one-uppishness. People who try to pretend they're superior makes it so much harder for those of us who really are.
I'm sorry. I guess not everybody can have a sauna, a pool, and a room for a pony. Or live in a largish house surrounded by expensive collectibles, while at the same time asking her community to go fund her a laptop while retaining the services of a celebrity lawyer. In any case, that phrasing is very deliberate, but also very manipulative too. And as always, it leaves out a lot more than it leaves in. The Kerzner cherry pick. Now, this video would be too long if I were to analyze all of the rhetorical manipulations that you use, Liana. However, I think it's kind of an interesting idea, so I think I will in its own time, so that people can see exactly what it is that you do. But here, you're leaving out necessary information and mentioning irrelevant information in order to manipulate the image that the reader has. The size of the apartment? Irrelevant. But it's a nice touch. In tandem with your portrayal of us as friendless and constantly trying to seek relevance, it's a very impressionistic character assassination piece of a loser, one that you can cowardly disclaim to have ever painted. Perhaps to most people who aren't aware of rhetorical devices, that rhetoric video will be fun and interesting. I'm looking forward to it. You also claim my husband is a Kiwi farmer. Now, my husband got a Kiwi Farms account to monitor what was being said about us because we believed ourselves to be in incredible danger thanks to our relationship to you. Your hand in it will be examined in another video. Asher posted here only three times to identify Mario, the guy from my first video, who had impersonated him, yes, he impersonated Asher too, and had an email sent to Kiwi Farms of Asher requesting that all his information be taken down from the site. Now, Liana, you are deeply familiar with Kiwi Farm culture, so you know that a letter like that is usually the spark that begins a harassment campaign, with the sender of the email being an immediate target. Mario knew what he was doing, so when that popped up, Asher immediately intervened, identified the letter as a forgery, and he was banned. But the result of that is that no harassment campaign came from that. So maybe Asher does know what he's doing. Incidentally, from watching Kiwi Farms, we were able to gather enough information to identify two Kiwi farmers, Mario and of course Giancarlo Vanzini, the young adult novelist making money off queer readers while also participating in their bullying, whom I exposed in my previous video. You also reduced the subject of the video to claiming it was 56 minutes of me saying, Kiwi Farms did it, not us, when that isn't what I said at all. In this order, I categorically denied your claims that you had not identified us by inference or name when the data on the Kickstarter page combined with my husband's real name and company name and my artistic moniker are sufficient identifiers to tie us. Then I proceeded to explain why the first nastygram you received was a forgery and spent 40 minutes going over the impersonation history of Mario Mattei, pseudonym, with plenty of writing samples that match the style and proof that he has showed up in a large number of places and the disturbing real-life side of this man. And then in the last 10 minutes were about Giancarlo Vanzini and a small sample of the evidence that we have on him that tied him to the Kiwi Farmer account of the name Shaniqua. You also claimed that in the video I accused you of ignoring Giancarlo's transphobic behavior. This is yet another false claim, Liana, because what I actually said was that you ignored Asher's warnings about the evidence that tied Giancarlo's identity to Shaniqua on Kiwi Farms. You claimed that you confronted and ejected the individual. Yeah, in January. You had the evidence in August. What did you do the time in between? Go out for a walk in the rain? It's also kind of libelous to call my husband a Kiwi farmer, Liana. He does not participate in the Kiwi farmer culture, does not believe that they believe, and only got an account there as a means to preventative defense as an at-risk demographic often targeted by the site. He never made any posts participating in any harassment campaigns, and his only posts were to make confrontation with the person who wanted him harmed. Now, Sage, Poppy's girlfriend, has now revealed that Poppy instructs her girlfriends to create accounts on Kiwi Farms to monitor her thread. So, is Sage a Kiwi farmer? I don't know. Poppy called her one. It's amazing how alike the two of you are. If we hadn't been tracking Kiwi Farms, we would have never gathered enough evidence to expose two trolls. And you'd still have Shaniqua in your midst. And yet, you are vehement that anyone who even looks at Kiwi Farms even for the reasons Asher and Sage looked, must be ejected forever. Quote, "If you're on the farms, you're agreeing to play by their rules." That's a heaping spoonful of blaming the victim there, Liana. It also kind of sounds like how Kiwi farmers think. Look at what they say. It's clearly very important that nobody you know be on Kiwi Farms. What don't you want people to see? That doesn't make any sense. But speaking about Kiwi Farms, isn't it interesting that you decided to echo the Kiwi Farm narrative that Asher claimed to have molested a child as a child to an actual virtuous pedophile, friend of Poppy's? I've already covered that exchange in my previous video, but Asher didn't write that on his blog. You're misrepresenting verifiable data in regards to what he actually wrote, which is deliberately spreading false information to negatively impact someone's character. You then proceeded to disclose the details of a traumatic event in Asher's past, albeit completely inaccurately, violating one of the deepest confidences a friend could have. Asher entrusted you with a part of his past that he hadn't entrusted to anyone else but me and his mother. And what did you do? Well, after you disclosed a homuncular version of events, you then dismissed it with, "That's it! That's all it was!" Minimizing someone's trauma. And your server went along with it, which is why I am not blurring any usernames. As far as I am concerned, you're all complicit in this economy of cruelty. You must be held accountable. So I'll tell you what you did, Liana. You became a monster, because that was monstrous. There is no other word that would fit. The mental health advocate peer counselor who pounds her chest to demonstrate her compassion and kindness did that. Then again, you freely disclosed mental health details about Mitchell Jura to your friends, details about his hospitalization, his mental health, living conditions, family history, knowing very well that since you are not licensed, you can't get suspended or your license revoked. This is one of the reasons why I say you hide behind your disability, because you demand utter respect for your trauma, to the point that we are supposed to excuse everything you do and claim it's a trauma response, and therefore never have to apologize for it or make amends for it. But other people? No, you get to be the arbiter of what's traumatic to them. You get to be the arbiter of how long it takes for them to recover. And people trust you with their mental health. Let that sink in, people. You know, I've never sworn at you, Liana. Even when we had prior disagreements, I've never exploded at you. And that's something I can always prove if you decide to lie about it. However, I think that at this point in the narrative, which isn't over yet, you've earned a good cursing. I'm not gonna do it, but god damn it, you really do deserve it. Griselda says that you can stop with the Santeria, by the way, which I don't know what that means, but that's what she said to tell you. But once again, our actions over the last few months now take a very different color when you realize that we've been able to see this unfolding. I'm curious as to what the repercussions on your reputation will be, revealing that information to a server of 100 paid members. And well, the whole revealing personal mental health history details of ex-clients too. That's not good. But before you claim defamation, Liana, I'm not damaging your reputation. Liana Kerzner, reputation is made by actions, and these are your actions. These are your own words right here. This is your reputation. The only one damaging your reputation is you. After all, didn't you say that truth is not defamation just because it makes you look bad? It's amazing that you claim that we have said what we have said about you is infinitely worse than your actions in the eyes of these people. Just these examples here, I've gone in order from the least grave to the absolutely monstrous, and the revealing of the subsequent mocking of a sexually traumatic event to the public. And there's more. I'll talk about it because at this point I'll have to. But let me take a sip of water. So the timeline. Asher spoke up 2 weeks after the cancellation video. I did not until December. The strongest objections you've raised target things that we said after December. Precisely when members of your community began sending us full screen captures of what you were saying and doing in your server about us. So now I'll show you exactly what we've done, beginning with the conversation with Asher, the end of that one. First, you described the 2-day ordeal as calculated on the 3rd day. When it was revealed that that was the case, and that it wasn't you spiraling out of control, Asher felt fundamentally abused and disrespected, and mirrored your frame and tone. You told him he was seeking an emotional reward for asking a question that you said was him seeking validation. Later, when you asked whether he'd noticed, you apologized, without addressing or apologizing the cruelty. He asked if you wanted a reward. You have since characterized that as a complete lack of empathy, multiple times, without even a moment of self-reflection. Second, after you disclosed private details about our relationship, Asher's trauma, and his disability status in your server, among other things, he waited months for you to correct the public story. When you did not, he published the complete conversation in July, so people could see what actually had been said and how you had distorted the truth. Your response was to call the publication a violation. Third, you were outraged when on January 14 I said that you were hiding behind your disability to avoid accountability. Yet on November 25th, you claimed that Asher said he was taking responsibility, listing the ways in which he was doing it, and then clearly didn't mean it because he went on at length about how he couldn't possibly be transphobic. Then Bobby Calloway making a catty comment about how if you have to say you're taking responsibility, you aren't actually taking responsibility, implying that Asher was hiding behind his condition to not take responsibility. Aside from the mirroring I did to you there, I need to point out how especially fucked up this one is on your part. The record of the conversation you referred to, that Asher has now published, does not contain any discussion of transphobia during the 3-day conversation. That framing appeared later in the cancellation video after, I suspect, Bobby functioned as your PR person. But yet, in a skeet dated January 19, 2025 at 4:32 p.m., you later claimed that you didn't bring up transphobia at all during the conversation because you feared that he would explode. So you talked to him about transphobia by not talking to him about transphobia. Who are you, Schrodinger's cat? It's also kind of funny that your community didn't really notice the fact that you told 2 stories. The facts don't match. And, oh yeah, here is you weaponizing Asher's condition. You knew he yelled in private during moments of extreme frustration, emotional pain, and meltdown. Never in the presence of anyone who wasn't part of his close family. But you claim you assumed that because of his condition he was going to explode at you. So let's see. Here's a definition you floated on September's episode about mental health stigma. Mental health stigma is assuming someone is going to do something just based on their diagnosis, without any direct evidence that they are symptomatic in this way. I mean, looking at that entire conversation, there was only one party exploding all over the place, Liana, and that was you. Asher remained calm throughout, and he was undergoing electroconvulsive therapy at the time, yet he managed to be completely calm, and only reflected back what you did at the very end with sarcasm, not violence or yelling. Incidentally, when I described what you did as raging on January 14th, you cheekily said to your Discord server, "How do you rage over text?" I don't know, Liana. How do you explode over text? Or does Liana Kerzner alone, Humpty Dumpty-like, gets to sit on the fence of lexicon and dictate when meaning applies and when it does not, in accordance to her whims to benefit her? When you do it, I guess it's sparkling discourse, and when anyone else does it, it's exploding or raging. I mean, here are some examples of you using raging in the same way that you doubted it could happen over text. So, welcome to the rhetorical device of equivocation, using the same word in different senses during an argument so that the meaning quietly shifts. It is incredibly manipulative, and guess what? That's exactly what Poppy did during her argument with Asher, which is what he called her out on. I'll get back to those points in the future, though, because there's a lot more to dig. But back to the main point, and those are 3 examples of actions we have taken that mirrored your actions after you did them. Here is a consistent through line. Everything we've done has been responsive and proportional to actions you took first. You said it yourself once that you were holding up a mirror. That is what we did. We saw what you did, then we reflected your words and conduct back to you, and the difference is that until now you didn't know what we knew. And that changes things, doesn't it? All those accusations. So for months and months, you have been disgusted by and condemning yourself. So sit with that. And notice, I still haven't talked about your traumatic events to anyone, not even my husband. And if you want to claim you've never told me about them, your memory appears to be especially poor. If you really want to make that claim by your own actions in your server, shouldn't I then speak about them in a place of my own choosing? After all, you've done it. So why shouldn't I? After all, I can decide to consider some of your experiences not worthy of being traumatic. Except that we both know the answer to that, don't we? Because it is not only vindictive and petty, it is intentional, deliberate cruelty, with a demonstrable intent to cause emotional distress. So, Liana, I'm going to tell you how things are going to go from this point on in light of your abominable actions. The timeline shows that when I raised my voice in criticism over your public actions, you proceeded to reveal private details you had no right to reveal, for no purpose other than emotional damages, revenge, and to destroy the character of my husband and me in the public eye. Since no one in your server is under any obligation of confidentiality, we can assume that information is spreading, as evidenced by the fact that I was sent these screenshots and have continued to receive them month after month. The only private thing that we released were the logs of the conversations you have lied about, and that is nowhere near commensurate with betraying sexual trauma. Just so you know. You are also the only person in whom I confided during those years, so I'll know where something comes from if I hear about it. I will address your arguments, your actions, and the things you have done in public, and how you behave towards others in public, and that includes the places in which you bring people who pay you to be there, and the things you say to them about us, because they will then speak to others as well. That's how gossip works, and that's what you are running, a mean girl gossip network. I will be addressing the rest of the things you have said in your server. These were just some of the most important and egregious things, but not all. You did not have our consent to drag our personal, private, vulnerable details to your public. And since they did not object, I'm not blurring their usernames. If they have so little respect for our privacy just because it provides them cruel amusement, then why should it be respected? But I'm giving you one gift: the power. Wherever you decide to take the rhetoric, I'll follow it. If you decide to obscure facts, I'll bring clarity. If you decide to misrepresent or lie, I'll pull up the truth by the roots. And if you decide to reveal personal information, well, that means it's okay to do so too, right? I mean, that would be deliberate cruelty, and we all know you are incapable of that. So as long as you are incapable of that, so am I. I'll deal with every relevant topic you have brought up to discuss in your server, in public, soon. After all, 100 paying members, so there's a lot that needs clarification. But after that, you have the power. We can play global thermonuclear war by engaging in the nasty mean girl shit you initiated, or a nice game of chess and actually address the points being made like fucking adults. Sleep on it.